Gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. Today I've decided to talk about enlightenment just about 60 seconds ago because I think I finally got the definition that's good for me. You know, my house is full of tons of books. Actually, I've been giving away a lot of them, but still have 4 bookshelves packed. And I have a section that's got history and philosophy in it, and I've read just tons of stuff on what enlightenment is and how to get enlightenment from various perspectives. Right, every book has got its spiritual enlightenment, personal enlightenment, family enlightenment, work enlightenment, that kind of thing. All the way up to your more existential, who are you, enlightenment. Let me submit a very basic definition of enlightenment that will take every book that's ever been written and every class that's been given and every guru that's ever spoken to all fit into one category. Enlightenment for me means that you can see more than you saw before. You are becoming more enlightened the more you inform yourself to see more. If you think about it, what are we trying to do on the internet? Through a podcast like this or some sort of video channel, we're trying to hear something or see something, or both, that increases our intake of data. And the interesting biological thing about this is that your ears simply do the same thing from the moment you came out of your mother to the moment you feel the first spiritual enlightenment. It's the same device. Your 5 senses are always there. Now, you know that as you get older and you start to calm your soul and stop living in this sort of feral state of I exist, I'm dealing with every second that comes at me, the second it comes at me, the more you meditate and go within yourself and start to disengage this notion that you are your body. You start to first feel this kind of spatial anomaly, You start to realize that you are a being, you can feel it. And even though you can see your hands and that sort of thing, you're still up there in your head. But then you have this spatial awareness. And of course, there are plenty of scientists that would just tell you this is this holographic sort of projection that the neurons in your mind create this chemical illusion that you actually have a body. And then when we lose a limb, we have phantom pain and phantom feeling, and we still feel like we have that part of our body. And that makes complete sense on a scientific level because you have assigned various neurons in your brain to handle what your foot is supposed to feel like and do. And if you're missing your foot all of a sudden, you still have the circuitry that's going to report in, and it's going to give you the illusion you have a foot until it realizes, I've got nothing to talk to, maybe we should reassign ourselves, right? Now, what's interesting is when let's just say you're happy and you're in point A, some sort of level of enlightenment, more than a location physically in the universe, it's more a reference of, this is how enlightened you are at point A, an evolutionary development milestone, right? And then all of a sudden, you realize that you have the opportunity to walk in any direction, 360 degrees, for as long as you want, for as long as you can take whatever's in those areas, right? Meaning if, one area is on fire, you probably won't walk that far. And if one's got an ocean, you probably will only swim for so long. But wherever you can physically exist mentally, Conceptually, well, basically, can your brain conceive of it and comfortably be in that space? You can be there. And what I mean by that is this. It's always interesting when you are, let's say, less enlightened, and you know moments in your life when you've been young and more impressionable and you were gullible or whatever. And then you grew up and you were less impressionable and less gullible and more intelligent. All this knowledge that you learned from school had finally turned into wisdom. The difference between shit and shinola. You finally figured it out. And you become stronger and stronger and stronger the moments that you can realize this is all the case, right? I mean, that this is the case, excuse me. But now, let's think about this. You're safe and you're sound and you're happy. And you're feeling adventurous. You're feeling adventurous because point A is totally worked out, man. It could be that point A was built for you by your parents. And you just had them, they just provided everything that you ever needed, answered every question that you wanted, provided opportunity for you to do some local exploration. Maybe if you're a lucky kid, they flew you around the world so you got a chance to see other cultures. Hear a language you don't even understand. And then you have this opportunity to go out and start making your own decisions, right? To explore. And it starts getting really exciting. I'm going to go discover something, mom, dad, honey, sweetheart. And sometimes it's rewarding, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's information that you have been dying for, and sometimes it's exactly what you didn't want to know. What's interesting about the world right now that I think we have to consciously realize as we go through this process, and I wanted to paint that image in your mind of starting off happy and then potentially being disappointed with some enlightenment in some areas, right? Now, if you, just to kind of split hairs for a second here, because I'm about to go off in the more traditional conspiratorial enlightenment areas for a brief stint here. You could obviously grow up in this world and be very conservative about your enlightenment paths, meaning, you could stay within, like, for instance, like the Midwest, and you could just be in love with your sweetheart and work at the local grocery store and go to college or whatever you got to do, but you stay in this nice, beautiful little circle. And you will live a wonderful life, most likely, as long as someone doesn't walk in your backyard and, red dawn you, which hasn't happened in my lifetime. So there's plenty of people out there who can live a really good, simple, fully enlightened to the extent they need to know life. But what's the trend of today? Let's say we have that farm in Kansas, and they got 2,000 or 3,000 acres that they manage, that they grow various crops on, right? Okay. And they're happy. They've got 2 families in the area, and they crossbreed their families, and so we don't get any necessarily too vertical of a tree. You don't have that family line that looks like a telephone pole. And they're just happy. They make their own food even. They make their vegetables, and they grow livestock, and it's all good. They got windmills and shit for power or whatever. As long as they could quarantine themselves, like The Village, right, that movie, they could do it. But the second that they reach out to find out what the rest of the world is like, out of this sort of Amish example I'm giving you, then they start bumping into horrible arteries of essentially terror, of sort of fictional narratives created by fake news, fed by military-industrial complexes, fueled by self-righteous douchebags every corner you stand on, right, with the ill-informed, right, protest signs about whatever they're, currently on in terms of a shtick. But in that particular example, which is a little bit extreme, think about how easy it is for your mind to grasp how polluted they're going to be very quickly. They're going to see hatred around the world. They're going to see this Muslim invasion of Europe. They're going to see the Democrats and the Republicans after each other. They're going to see, Black Lives Matter. They're going to see Antifa. Everyone's warring at every level, as if, again, civil unrest is the goal of those who control the narratives. And the only people that control the narratives are those with the money that own all these arteries. And, they do sell banner ads and advertising around any dramatic thing that occurs. So if the guy in New York drives around and kills people with his car, CNN and Fox automatically make profit from that death immediately because they sell news around it. Isn't that fascinating? So, it's just bizarre how someone could walk into a convenience store. They could film themselves live, on Facebook and say, I'm about to make Fox and CNN and BBC and RT a bunch of cash. Watch this. Walks in and arbitrarily just kills people. And then offers the footage up and offers the information up to the news agencies, and boom. How much money do you think they could make in, some sort of drugstore murder that's probably going to keep the press's eye for a week and a half, right? And so they're going to sell banner ads and they're going to sell pre-roll ads and all this other shit around a horrendous moment because that's what they do, man. That's their business. But back to our family, the fact that we can easily see without any major degree in sociology or whatever, we can see how the world will corrupt these two families in this little community. And what's going to happen when they have grown up their whole lives, and let's just say they have the whole Anne Frank spectrum from little kids all the way up to grandparents like Charlie Bucket's house. And everyone has lived a charmed life, and then all of a sudden they meet civilization, and it just turns to shit. For whatever reason, they didn't own a television. Or if they did, it only got channels that were showing movies without any narrative of the world. Now, if that's a little unsettling, right? Think about the family getting corrupted and how your soul kind of aches for them. Think about us. Think about us. Where are we? We're fucking knee deep in this stuff. We're neck deep. We're bologna on a cold roll. No, we are way deep in the ocean of this shit. The bad narratives run through us. For those who are Christian, who talk about the Holy Spirit going in you, all right. If you watch news, if you watch television, if you read, shit rags like TMZ, and you go to these news organizations without a filter turned on, huge, right? Reading the news online, the metaphor for how to do this without getting hurt is about the same as find a welding mask that allows you to look at the sun. Because the sun is alluring, just like bugs love light. Light feels good. It metabolizes our body in many different ways. Pituitary gland pumping out vitamin D. Same thing. We're allured to moving stuff. Oh, it's like a caveman. You ever been to a restaurant with your loved one and you got a TV behind her and she doesn't have a TV behind you and she's looking you in the eye and you hate sports, but you can't stop looking at the game. It's like a mesmerizing circuit, 60 frames a second. I should say 60 hertz is a sort of suggestive frequency. There's a reason why it is the frequency of television devices, because it puts you in a meditative sense and a docile frequency. Just imagine this for a brief second. They have chosen 60 frames a second because it makes you docile. That's why fluorescent lights are 60 hertz. Now imagine they've done this and it makes you sensitive to whatever you're viewing. You tend to believe whatever you view, and that's because they're pumping shitty narratives at you online. And then all of a sudden you watch a conspiracy video. And the same substrate that is making you believe bullshit is now making you believe conspiracy. It's a little terrifying, right? It means you would genetically be predispositioned to believe anything that's broadcast through a television unit, no matter what it is, right? But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, this is supposed to be about enlightenment, dude, and you're just going off on sort of the basic mechanisms of learning how life works. I think it's going to be very difficult in life to be enlightened if we don't have a strict definition of what it is. To see more, you know, to not only widen the aperture of your eyes and increase your peripheral vision and the intake of that data. Like I'll give you an example of something I find interesting. I just found out last year, which is that your peripheral vision has higher frame rate than the frames in front of you. I'm not sure why that is, but that's supposed to be what the case is, right? But we have to learn how to mulch data once it comes through the door, because I think that when you're young, we just see things and believe them, right? You go to Disneyland as a 5-year-old and you see a hard plastic costume cast member at Disneyland, and you know the thing isn't animating. For some weird reason, you look at Mickey Mouse and you're like, totally real, man. I always thought it was such a depressing thing when I was a kid, when I go to Disneyland or Disney World and these cast member suits would come out and, they animate a little bit with their hands and they act cute and they go to college for that. But in the end, I was like, this is a crock of shit, man. This is not real. You're a fucking dude in a costume, right? But what starts happening as you get older? You start processing information multiple times. It comes into your brain. You stop it before it goes into your long-term memory, and you look at it, and you analyze it from every angle. You try to see if it's a friend or foe. Is this something to be alarmed about, or can I just throw it back there? Is this something I don't even give a shit about? And then you just throw it out the front door. I have a pretty good memory. For several aspects of data types, I have a photographic memory. But I tell you what, when I see something I don't give a shit about, I don't remember it at all. I don't remotely attempt to store the data. With a little bit of analysis, I've decided I don't want to do any more analysis, and I throw it away. And I think we're all this way. You ever been up at night and you can't go to sleep? You've lied down, but your brain won't turn off. And sometimes that's more of a creative epiphany loop that you're in that's beautiful to experience. And other times you have a subject on your mind that is driving you crazy. And not necessarily a negative piece of information, just a piece of information, something that you're constantly looking at. It's like an orb of data came into your spectrum of influence, and you just keep analyzing it until you feel like you understand what the hell is going on. You try to gain a perspective of how you relate to the information to find out what it means to you in proximity to your being, right? Meaning, for instance, you can watch on television or YouTube a lion tearing something apart in the jungle, right? In the desert. And then you have a lion in your backyard and you're out there and the door's locked and he's got you pinned down, or he's right in front of the door and you're like, shit, where can I go? He can hop over every fence and kill me. Now all of a sudden that data means something completely different to you. It is a personal threat model. All intellectual and physical data coming into your 5 senses are being assessed on this level. And I would say that the 6th sense is obviously a given for most of you, which is your spiritual interpretation of data. As I've said several times, you have your feeling of truth and your feeling of a lie. Yes, we can be duped, right? You could have your first relationship with someone who's incapable of being loyal to you, and man, it feels great. It feels great, and then all of a sudden, boom, you find out that they weren't loyal to you, and that frequency, that feeling that everything was okay, you're starting to look into those feelings a little bit more, and maybe you can discern that the amount of analysis that you did on those feelings was 0. You just took it in as pure love, which is the world we should be able to live in. But now, you go back and reanalyze every moment you have with this individual, and you try to parse it further. You try to see more within the data set that you've already taken in. You just didn't realize that there was a level of granularity that you weren't analyzing with, meaning, you were looking at, you didn't have enough parts per million within the data of this individual to realize that they weren't really being sincere, that there were indicators that they had kissed someone else 5 seconds before they came home, or whatever. Whether it be you smell someone on this person, or you just sense a differential between the first day that you met and the day that they seemingly were with someone else, right? And so there's these little tiny levels of granularity, and that's what you get really good at as you get older. Obviously, for any of you who are parents, you know all about the I was dumb once as a child, and now I'm a parent, and I'm not trying to pick my child's friends or their boyfriends or girlfriends. You're just trying to protect them against slimy people, or people that aren't awake but seem to be kind of a bam bam in life, right? They're just swinging a big club and hurting, potentially other people with no real care or knowledge that they do so. Maybe out of ignorance, maybe out of intent. You never know. But you don't care. You want them away from your kids. Here's one beautiful thing about your brain. And I covered this in a couple different episodes in season 1. One of the episodes is called Thinking, and the other one's called Left and Right Brain. But it goes like this. We always talk about how thinking at first is just like picking up your weights after 2 years of not working out, and it just knocks you out, man. You still feel good when it's all over, but you just have that resistance until you feel the euphoric jump as a result of lifting weights. Well, the same thing goes for your mind, right? You have neurons in your mind, and the reason why they multiply is almost entirely up to you. Because they're not like normal cells that mitosis on a regular 35 to 90-day basis. Because they have to. A neuron only multiplies if it gets overworked, overstimulated. Its cycle says, and this is absolutely brilliant, the more I am used, the more that I ratchet up this sort of bonus bar in the fighting game, right? And you punch a lot, and this bonus bar goes up, and all of a sudden you get the super punch. It's almost exactly the same. It says the more you use me, the more I'm going to kick off a replication cycle. Because obviously this person is thinking a lot, and the more they think, the more we need to give them the equipment to do so. And so if you want to have a really dense neural mesh, think all the time. Hurt your brain all the time, and have fun with it, of course, right? So the interesting thing is a lot of times people will say, well, enlightenment is merely hearing the right thing at the right time and being able to, again, add to your portfolio of what you can see and therefore accomplish more in life or enjoy the little things in life a lot more than you used to, which is definitely the case. Why do they have that old saying, that cliche about stop and smell the flowers? It's because when you're a young person, a lot of times we appreciate a flower, but we only appreciate it at a very basic, minute level. We don't see Mother Nature and Earth all participating together to give that flower life. We don't think about the rain, just the fact that predators aren't eating the flower. I mean, there's all kinds of things that when you get older, you increase your portfolio and essentially the data metrics that you're able to appreciate things by. And so you could become not necessarily enlightened about flowers, but you could. You're increasing your neural mesh such that you can see more. And if we are truly a symbiotic connection between what I believe to be your soul and your body, then the manifestation of mind, which is the two coming together, think about it. You feel powerless to really reach into the universe and be where your soul is every single day. Now, a lot of people claim all kinds of shit, but then they don't really ever have any stories about, the experience. Meaning, someone will say they astral project, and you're like, oh, that's great. Tell me about that. Well, man, I can't really do it, man. It's just you have to sort of be there, man. It's like, okay, whatever. If you really astral projected, you would be bringing home the bacon in terms of full enlightenment. But let's think about this. You got your body over here, your vessel. You have your soul, which you can feel. You can feel it. Again, a lot of the emotional spectrums that you go through in life have very little mapping to your body. So a lot of the love and hate and sorrow and sadness and the gut feelings one way or the other, your intuition, all of that's coming from your soul and bears no witness to your body whatsoever. Your brain does not account for that kind of stuff, right? In my lifetime, there hasn't been a huge increase in the knowledge of the brain. All there have been new paradigms created to claim that in computer simulation we can emulate it. We've increased the results of our Turing test, basically. But we haven't really figured out the mind much more than we had it 20, 30, 40 years ago, at least in the public sector. But now think about this. If you ever wanted to feel like you wanted to get closer to your soul, and you believe in a symbiotic creation, or relationship between your body and your soul, which is sort of what you have to adopt once you believe in a collective amount of energy that is who you are. Again, it's not electron energy, so you're not going to find it in some sort of oscilloscope. But if you increase your neural net by any means necessary, by any means possible, you are going to increase your relationship with your soul. And because I believe your soul is connected to all the other souls, and connected to all things that matter in life, right? Life is a soul. Life manifested in a body is just a temporary current in water, right? But the life that never dies, the light bulb that never burns out, is the overall consciousness of the universe. So the more that you stress your mind and think, and I'm telling you, man, let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. You've never whittled wood, and you just get yourself a pocket knife. Be very careful, always push away from your hands. And you start carving things. Your brain is going to have to increase its neural mesh to handle that task, especially if you haven't done it before. And then you're going to carve real basic shapes first. Then you're going to get into the nuances of using the tip of the knife to create various. You're going to get wedge tools, and you're going to start creating curly hair or feathers with all the details. And the more you jump into that one thing, if that turns you on, the neural mesh in your brain increases. And then when you look at the rest of the world, the way that you take in data could potentially be way more intense. Now take anything else in life, reading books. My people come to me all the time and say, "What's the last book that you read?" And what they're really asking me is, "What's the last fictional, entertaining book I've read?" And I always say, "None." I've read tons of fictional books, but I prefer to read factual books. I prefer to learn something as opposed to be entertained. I can find great television shows to fill up every single free moment I've got. But when I lie down in bed, I want to pull up, a book that's written by a mastermind. But isn't that exciting that we can take a 100% control over our enlightenment? But now let's say that you adopt that format. You understand that, you believe that, and you start to just become smarter, really. I mean, it's going to help you in everything in life. It's not just anything on this show. If nothing else, take this technique and run off and, make your own show. But now let's think about the pop culture methodology of becoming enlightened in this world. Again, I once had a family member of mine say that she would like to create sort of a bed and breakfast and have an enlightenment camp. And what's really interesting about this is the individual who's telling me this is obviously a super sweet person, but has really, she's physically been places in the world and looked at things, but everything that she believes is in a hardbound book in a bookstore. It's in a pop culture magazine like the New Yorker. And so I'm sitting here thinking, now, wait a minute, how can you enlighten anyone out of the standard pop culture envelope? As long as someone is mildly informed about the world, they're going to have all the knowledge you already have. You haven't lived outside of the standard bubble of influence, and so what you have to bring anyone is really just sort of a bias of the official story. Who needs that? I have a very close friend of mine that used to do DMT with a bunch of shaman in Berkeley University area. He was looking for enlightenment in that realm and found that, even though he had trips and they were phenomenal, they were very personal to him. And he said the only annoying thing is that they did these rituals around these sort of Native American rituals, a bunch of white guys. And he said it's really done to protect them against a police invasion, and they could claim religious rights. But if they just sit around doing DMT without doing the chants, then, yeah, they all get busted or whatever. Really odd. There's people who go to gurus, Hindu gurus, and they sit and they talk. And these guys are phenomenal. I mean, a lot of these people are phenomenal. There's women and there's men, mostly men. People do the ayahuasca trips down in South America, which is actually, I guess, becoming a trend here in California. People are doing ayahuasca all over the place. I don't know if I'd trust anybody in California to actually bring me ayahuasca. They have peyote parties. Why do I mention those? I mention those because there's a cliche around becoming enlightened. And it is anything but being enlightened. In a lot of cases. Now, people find enlightenment within those avenues. But here's the thing. This is what I'm going to suggest to you. A lot of you guys really dig the channel, and you love the shows, and we love the information exchange, especially in the comments. But I would never personally sell you that I can enlighten you. As much as I try to pass information to you, the notion that I am somehow qualified to enlighten anyone, and again, I've never ever thought I was qualified to enlighten anyone, but I would know that if you came to me for enlightenment, you would be coming into my bias, and when you come to me for enlightenment, it's different than you watching a television, or watching, one of the episodes on the channel. When you visit an episode on this channel, hopefully your attitude is, well, we'll see if we agree. Or I've never heard of this. Let's see if I could agree with it once he presents this new data set to me. Boom. But if you come to me and you're like, enlighten me, and you sit in this backyard and we have a bunch of bean bags out and incense burning and it's a good day where there's not a lot of helicopters flying over, I don't know if I'd know what to say. You know? I can mentor an individual really well. I can get into someone's brain and say, what is it you're looking for? What makes you the happiest on this planet? And we can break everything down to, again, like I always say on the show, the sub-themes that really drive you every single day, and make sure that, you know, however you want to view it, however God made you to lust after life, we'll use that as a template to mirror it to this instance of reality that we're in, which is the jobs that you can get, the education you can get to get different jobs, all that kind of stuff, right? So when I see individuals, and again, I was at LMU University, Loma University in LA, and I was there for, I think it was my screenwriting class with Robert McKee, one of many. They had some festival going on or something going on where they had all these Indian gurus everywhere. And they had these tents all set up, and they were selling all kinds of yoga mats and you know, stuff. So there's a commercial element to it as well. And I'm sure these guys have gotten together and they do circuits around colleges. And, you know, a lot of it looked legit. I sat and watched a couple for a few minutes in between lunch break. Or I guess I stood up. But it was a lot of beautiful knowledge. Like if you've ever seen the little tiny book called The Prophet, it's just a beautiful gem of great parables about how to live life. And so it's not like they were doing anyone harm. But think about, I was watching these kids and I was seeing kids be swept away because they were, for the very first time, hearing a philosophical thought. And for the first time, a lot of these kids were hearing any mechanical advice about how to live life, about how to love. Love and life had come at them in an abstract, sort of random way, and they just were absorbing it, believing it or not believing it, not really analyzing how does it apply to an overall strategy of life. The problem with the millennials who have these, you know, $100,000 degrees and they're serving lattes all day is that they didn't have any training from their parents about how to strategically plan their life, and they never found a love because they were preoccupied with fucking telephones and the internet and bullshit, Snapchat, horse shit, and never defined what they could do with their lives. And so when it came time to get kicked out of the house and pay their own bills, my God, talk about feeling alienated, lost, angry. No wonder this promise of socialism is so popular. Believe me, it's a strategy. It's a strategy from on high. Socialism obviously yields control to the controllers, even more. It's failed every single time it's ever been tried to be turned on. And spare me all the examples of where it hasn't failed. There's only a couple places on Earth they say it hasn't failed, and it's like either the population's like 50,000 people, or they're full of shit. All I got to say is the clock has not struck 12 yet on the test of whatever you think is a successful socialized experiment out there. I'll give you a quick example of how socialism is impossible. All right, it goes like this. For any of you who have been to church, or you're familiar with churches, you know that if you handed out the same exact Bible to a bunch of people, and they'd never read anything else, and you tell them, read it, and tell me what you think, no one is going to have the same interpretation of the whole book. They're not. And it's because they're going to bring their individual experiences to the table, and it's going to be different. And that's why socialism will never work. A lot of people come into the equation and say, well, I know that everyone would think differently, but then we'll just fucking pass laws and everyone will be forced to believe the right thing. Right thing, right? No, you're going to have a bunch of robotic cops around there with chrome faces and cattle prods, and you're never going to get unification of mind. You're never going to be able to ever get freedom out of the heart of man. That is impossible. As much as the deep state folks want to make us toxified so bad that we can't use our bodies to resist, I assure you, the driving force of man is freedom. That is the kernel piece of code that can never be extinguished or muted. Even if you look at someone in North Korea, for instance, that's terrified to speak up, they are still in a state of misery because they have that kernel of freedom that whoever created us put in there. It's just there. It's there in every single person, period. Enlightenment has to be a personal journey by the individual. If you adopt a guidance system from someone else, a guru, an uncle, a mother, a father, a brother, whatever, you must understand that that is merely an artery of information that still needs to be discerned and factored into your own life. You have to decide whether or not you agree with that. And believe it or not, you can agree with something on a Monday and disagree with it on a Friday, and the inverse is also true. Seemed like a good idea, but when I applied it, it really didn't have anything to do with me. And what's challenging about this is that we all know those individuals who are what we would say to be lost. Not bad people, not stupid people. They're just lost. They have awakened and they don't have any guidance. It's almost as if they found the trap door out of the Matrix, but there was no, Morpheus on the other side. And so they wake up in this pod. All this shit hooked to their back, and they're terrified, right? Or maybe they're inquisitive, but not terrified. But now what do? And that's how cults find their members, right? They want to find the most ill-informed, excited, energetic person that's looking to take on new paradigms of enlightenment. And what's interesting is when you feel lost, there's an amazing attraction, right? There's an opposite attracts sort of formula. You're lost. You're empty, and as information comes at you, life, it feels chaotic and disorienting. And the more that you think that other people have all their shit together and you feel lost, it's terrifying. You're like, how's everyone else have a job? How is everyone else driving a Mercedes every single day and I can barely keep the roof over my head? How's everyone eating at these fancy restaurants but I can't afford McDonald's? How's everyone else wearing $10,000 worth of clothing every day and I can barely afford, hand-me-downs? And so if someone steps in front of that uncertainty and says, I'm David Koresh, let me tell you about Jesus and guns, you could be really apt to follow a guy like that. And as he solves the basic problems, because he's never been disoriented with his hubris, you start to say, well, this guy's my savior. I was completely lost. I was completely disoriented. I was scared. And he made me feel secure and protected. And he brought me an awareness of God that I had never seen before. It's a big deal, man. And, for anyone mad at me for mentioning him, yeah, we all understand that we don't know who that guy was. The last person I'm going to fucking believe is the big giant fucking gorilla, Janet Reno, who's now probably safely tucked away in some hot place. But they're out there. And it doesn't even have to be that the person is trying to help you has anything to do with a nefarious plan whatsoever. It's just, it's their plan. It's their life. What they're giving you is what's been appropriate for them. And maybe it's appropriate for you for a little while, right? There was a movie I've mentioned a couple times on various shows. Bill Murray's finest movie, in my opinion, is a movie called Razor's Edge. It's made in the 80s. I think it's made about 83. If you like Bill Murray and you haven't seen that film, I would wager you have not seen his finest work. But let me just tell you the basics about the movie so you can understand how it applies to enlightenment, because his character in that film became enlightened through a very tumultuous path. It was, I believe, around 1916 or so when this movie starts. Obviously, there's a world war going on, but America's not involved. He was involved with sort of an upper-class family. I think he was fairly normal, probably middle class, upper middle class, something like that. But anyway, he goes over to participate in World War I. I believe he was a medic. And he suffers the slings and arrows and gets damaged over there, and he doesn't get, hobbled or anything, but he sees some pretty nasty shit over there. And he comes from a wonderful world of America, goes over there and sees things that no one of his age bracket had ever seen. He comes back changed. But he also comes back finding out that his love interest has taken a different path. I'll just put it that way. And in the the 1900s and the teens, life was pretty basic. You graduated high school. Only some people went to college back in those days, but you were to get married at 18 and have your kids by 20 or 22, and life was supposed to begin. You get a trade skill, you get a nice job, and you just go to work. Well, obviously, when he came back, things were different. And so he's sort of lost. He's devastated. The formula that was sold to him his whole life is not working out, which is the way it is today all year round, right? So he goes on this adventure around the world. He ends up going to a Tibetan temple and studying from Tibetan monks. It feels like he's out there for almost 10 years or so, but I can't remember how many years he was out there. It's quite a few years at least, 2 or 3. And then he makes his way back to his home territory. And there were these two couples at the beginning of the film, his girlfriend and his buddy and his girlfriend. Well, there was a cross. His buddy went after his wife. Went after his girlfriend and made him his wife. So his best friend's married to his old squeeze. And then there's this other girl that is devastated by what happened, and she ends up becoming what you believe to be sort of a opium den woman who I guess would be a prostitute as well. And of course he knows her from childhood. He knows her from his teenage years, and he realizes this is a really good woman who's just been devastated by the relationship chaos that he also suffered. But instead of going around the world, she ended up getting swallowed up by the system. So he takes her on as a project. And that's all you need to know from the movie to go see it. But for him, he was able to achieve his own enlightenment. But he didn't come back thrilled to death just because he got enlightened. What he came back with was the perspective on what is important in life and what isn't important in life. He also came back with several tools to be able to address problems when it occurs, when they occur. The weirdest thing about being alive is the paradox of feeling like there's a purpose for you being alive, but realizing very quickly that there are no instruction manuals for man. There aren't. And so we're sharing this domain of existence, and if you are within the circle of individuals who have somehow accumulated some relevant enlightenment towards a particular objective, right? There are bankers that have enlightenment about how to control populations. There are government politicians that know how to play the lobby game, and they get to steal the best health care and best retirement packages. They've got enlightenment to that degree. We want enlightenment to obviously protect ourselves from those individuals, to imbue our own lives with as many rewards through perspective, right? When you wake up in the morning and you're alive, for anyone who's had a near-death experience, when you wake up alive, okay, when you wake up at all, right, and you breathe and you have most of your faculties, your body works well, even if you got aches and pains, at least it works. You feel wonderful. But without the perspective to compare it to, a lot of people wake up with no excuse why they can't conquer the world, but they constantly make excuses why they can't conquer the world, right? And so we engage in the process that we're doing on this show, which is share. I stimulate the conversation with a 1-hour episode, and you guys jump in the comment section and blow it up, right? Some of you guys make comments that are so damn good that it's like an exponential, right? It's times 2, times 3, times 4. One of the things that always warms my heart when I see you guys really productively talking to each other in the thread. One person posts something cool and there's like 25 replies, and it just stays beautiful. It stays positive. No one's, yelling obscenities at each other. But what I need you to understand is, and this is just going to speak to a few of you, but it is important to realize that what works for you may not work for someone else, and vice versa. We do not have to impose everything that works for us on someone else. Now, it does get frustrating, okay, when you see someone doing something silly. Maybe they drink too much, maybe they do too many drugs or whatever, they're lazy. And you're like, geez, I know that that's never going to really yield any benefit to their life, other than when they get out of that experience, they're going to double down and know that thing that they were doing was the reason why they weren't getting what they wanted in life. I will say that as we move into this last section here, there's a very interesting thing with enlightenment. Once you achieve some form of it, some category of it, right? None of us will be fully enlightened. This idea that you're a Tibetan monk in a Tibetan temple and supposedly you spend 50, 60 years trying to be enlightened. There is no top end of the game, right? I think you would have to be God to be fully enlightened. And then that job is something that you better thank your lucky stars he does for you. There are some of you who live life and you realize what it's like to hear your own voice and to be in your own world. Regardless if you have a spouse with a bunch of kids and a really thick family and a good circuit of friends, you will have those moments that you're capable of recognizing your existence. Then there are those who are so overwhelmed with your immediate circle of friends, family, and whatever, that you're unable to hear your own voice, but you want to. And that's where you find this force coming at you that says, make time for yourself, make time for yourself. Or sometimes you just feel the frustration that you can't control your own destiny because you're constantly serving other people. For those who are enlightened, I guarantee you, either through serendipitous experiences where you have more time than you want, you get enlightened because you're forced to listen to yourself. But for those who have punched through the busier format, they will always tell you you have to make time to listen to your own voice. You have to make time to meditate. And again, meditation is not very attractive, where you actually sit down and you do nothing. I would say I rarely ever do that, but what I do is, I don't sit down in any formal Hindu technique or Buddhist technique. What I end up doing is sitting down in a chair with my notebooks, and I jump into one of my research projects, and I just take off where I left off, and I start just scribing tons of notes. One of the most beautiful parts about getting more enlightened, according to you, right? Not according to me, not according to anyone else. When you're picking and choosing the things that you want to analyze more, is when you gain control over the process, right? You gain control. You say, I am going to force myself to think about these things right here because they're curious to me. And I will tell you that you will find things that seemed extremely mysterious and interesting, and then all of a sudden you dive into that and you realize, really, I just need to think about it for about 10 minutes, and then I was completely fine with where I ended up. You need to know that's cool, that's okay. And there'll be this thing that you thought you didn't give a shit about, and you start thinking about it, and you start realizing, oh my God, that's the rabbit hole over there. And again, it's a rabbit hole down inside your soul. Or maybe you're trying to punch through your mind over to your soul. I'm always saying on the show, fairly indirectly, study the way you feel in certain scenarios. And I think that is the most wild frontier that exists. If I said to you, hey, by the way, we found this giant continent on Earth. Maybe if it is a flat disc, and we found an artery where you can literally sail a boat through the coastline of flat Earth and get to this other outer ring of other continents. And I said, you have the opportunity of discovering that continent. Right away, especially if you watch shows like Survivor, you got to be physically fit, probably young. You're going to have to know a lot about sailing. You have to know about everything of setting up a civilization. If you're lucky enough to find it completely uninhabited, you're going to have to give birth to your own babies. I mean, it's an intense circumstance. You've actually got to physically do something, and you have to be a certain age and da-da-da-da, right? But now here's the cool part about being enlightened within yourself spiritually. You are sitting probably where I would say 95% of you are sitting in a location, whether it be your car or your house or your bed. You're exactly where you can be to start the process. How cool is that, man? How cool is that? You got everything you need. If you really want to energize it and record it in a much more productive manner, what I would suggest is you get the pad and paper. What I buy are these black notebooks. They're unfortunately ridiculously expensive. It's just fucking paper in a bound format. But they have no writing on them at all. They have no lines. Doesn't matter if they do or not, but it's just blank sheets of paper. If you were to look inside my notebooks, you would find diagrams of what I believe to be, like I have ethereal particle research I'm doing, I have infinity research I'm doing, I have spiritual research, I'm bringing them all together into one realm. But I've drawn pictures of what I believe to be the proximity and the physical models of various things. And I will tell you that by drawing things on paper, I realize I'm wrong a lot of the times. And the funny thing is there's all these folks like Da Vinci that obfuscated his writings by writing things backwards so you can only view it in a mirror, which is kind of a joke. Like that would be hard to decipher. But the nice thing is that in my material, I have gone past a lot of what I've written. So you might read one of my passages and say, oh, he says this is the way it is. That means he believes that this is the way it is. And it's not actually the case. The most you could possibly say about my notes is to say that's what he believed the moment the ink was written on the paper. But I will tell you this. A lot of times the second I pull the pen up from the piece of paper and read it back to myself or look at what I've drawn, I immediately vanquish that theory from my knowledge. Now, what I don't completely vanquish it. What I do is I put that on the false shelf. And I'm looking for the one I'm going to keep on the truth shelf. But I don't go back and put a T and an F by everything to say this is true, this is false. What you might see later on is me contradict my own theory at a later date. But because I don't date all my pages, you would never know. I guess chronologically left or right is probably how it's mostly transcribed. I think it's interesting that we had diaries a long time ago. And, kids still do it to this day. But what are you really writing about? I mean, you are writing about your daily experience. And you're able to see your daily experience after it's occurred, which gives you more analysis of your life, right? It's a very valuable process. Women did it, I would say, 10-1 over men back in the day. Now you don't hear about it that much anymore. I have a few friends of mine that have diaries, and what's interesting is you have your fake Lee Harvey Oswald diary, which is written in female handwriting from start to finish. what seems like an all-in-one day, and then you see a real diary and the pens change, right? You use an ink pen one day that's black, and then you have a blue one the next day. Maybe you scribe in a pencil one day. The other thing too is a really healthy diary, in my opinion, has tons of diagrams in it. Drawings of things. Well, I saw a star today and it was really cool, and they draw the star that they saw. Or they're feeling an overwhelming moment of love, and so they light up the page with love. Or they have a dark day and they draw darkness, right? I never kept a diary. I did used to make these audio tapes, which I'm looking for right now somewhere in my garage, where I would do what's called a self-seminar at the end of every year. I wouldn't be on December 31st or anything, but I would push record on my stereo with the microphone, and I'd sit there and just record. I would talk about the last 1 year of my life and what I thought I accomplished that was great, and then I would predict or just essentially say what I'm going to go after the next year. And what was amazing, and if you go back to law of attraction, I was able to always accomplish my goal. And what that taught me was make your goals pretty profound, because you'll get them. It's almost as if you've made a contract with the universe. That is, if you give me these opportunities, I will take advantage of them and I will nurture them. And it seems like the universe just responds beautifully to that. The other one that happened to me, which I've mentioned a couple times in the show, in the 90s, for whatever reason, I started writing lyrics probably in the late 80s, and they were horrible. I was writing a lot of music at the time, and I couldn't even play an instrument and sing at the time in the late 80s. And then by the mid-90s, I'd figured it out. I figured out how to put it all together. But I started writing tons and tons of lyrics that sort of you could now call poems. And I think I wrote, what I would consider to be poetry. I've probably written maybe 50 poems, and the rest is like 450 lyrics. But the interesting thing is that I would take my emotional spectrum for the day. Sometimes I write 4 in one day, sometimes I write 1 a week. But I would take any frustration or glee that I had, and I would turn it into a lyric that talked about sort of something related to the theme of what I was talking about, right? And I believe it was extremely enlightening, because I went through the phases that everyone goes through when you write poetry, which is you pick all the stupid words. You write ecstasy and that kind of shit in your lyrics, and you kind of realize, Jesus Christ, that's got to be the worst word to ever exist in a poem. Everything rhymed at first, because it was lyrical for music. And then it was more just straight, imagery, and the depth of what I wrote got really deep and really solid. And I suggest, one, it increases your ability to articulate amazingly. You start learning new words, and you start saying, I'm tired of using all these little words because they sound stupid. I mean, they just sound remedial. It's not actually true. But you'll start to expand your horizons, and you'll start to find out that you've expressed love the same way in, say, 25 poems, and you start to realize there's so much more to love. I got to figure out a better way to describe things. Instead of going on point and saying love, you don't even say the word love, but you create a bunch of images and scenes and scenarios in your lyrics such that you are illustrating quite unequivocally love. I had something that I used to call the dark side, which is my suite of poems. And every time I wrote something that was very negative, I put it in the dark side. I used to have this shit online, believe it or not. And what I found was this profound moment when I realized that writing it down purged it from my system. Whatever was eating me up, it was gone. And that was this amazing process. And here I am by myself, living at my house up north in Silicon Valley, and I'm pounding out these lyrics and sharing them with people, and people would read them. I used to have a little fan base online in the mid-90s, and they would realize that I had the same frustration they did, but I had worked for, I don't know, half a decade to perfect my language. And so they were like, oh my gosh, you said this the way I'm feeling it, but you said it in a much deeper way, which is the way we feel it. And so they were vicariously living through my lyrics, which was cool. And I'll give you kind of a shortcut to writing decent poetry if you've never done it before, but you may, you have some sort of desire to try it out. There used to be this well, it still exists. If you go to a creative writing class at any point in junior high, high school, college, there's usually that day where the teacher assigns you to a project where you simply sort of write into a document just every single word and concept that's coming to you as fast as you can. You don't worry if the previous word has anything to do with the next word. You don't worry if the previous sentence matches the next sentence. You just keep writing. And you'll be having a good day where you're writing a bunch of positive stuff, or you may be feeling frustrated and you start to purge. I would say do that experiment with yourself for as long as you can until there's going to be this wild sweet spot. It's really phenomenal. It's almost as if to plagiarize my episode on creativity way back in season 1. I believe very wholeheartedly that the universe is a very conscious set of beings. I think that everything that's ever lived on Earth transcends into that realm. I don't think everything in that realm has been human. But there's a beautiful contract that you can write with the universe without signing any documentation in blood. It basically says that the way that it works is this: if you demonstrate to the universe that you are willing to invest, the universe is right there to invest in you. But if you don't buy the guitar, there's no one out there who's going to give you a guitar solo in your head. I mean, they might, but they're trying to entice you to get the instrument to pay attention to what you have as a capability. Once you start doing sort of this kind of sort of abstract writing, and you do it consistently, you start to teach the universe that you are willing to express and channel thoughts into words. Eventually, the universe will start to bless you with clearer and clearer visions of what you want to say. They understand that, being alive is to be experienced, right? We get, I think, a little bit confused in this world with experiencing life means you have to go out to a beach and run around in the sand. You have to go to a football game or travel to Rome. I'm not going to take that away from the assertion. Sure, you should probably do those things as well. Live in the environment that you live in. Enjoy it, right? But there's a huge frontier that makes those experiences, in my opinion, much more rewarding, which is the one that's inside your mind. For a second, you have to accept the fact that we are inside a vessel for a reason. In my opinion, it is not because this is the only way to be alive. It's because this is a way to be alive. It brings with it restrictions. And those restrictions, I believe, have been imposed to sort of focus us on what is important. Perhaps it's a stage. The caterpillar turns into a butterfly. Perhaps until we become enlightened, we are nothing more than a caterpillar running around eating pop culture all fucking day. And what we need to do is turn into a butterfly. And what's the difference? What is the physical difference between a caterpillar and a butterfly besides the way that their bodies are put together? One crawls on the ground. One crawls on vegetation. One is heavily preyed upon because it can't go anywhere else but on surfaces. And then a butterfly happens. This crazy metamorphosis of the body. It grows frickin' wings. A caterpillar and a butterfly look nothing alike. Do you realize that? It's got to be one of the most amazing things that's happened here. But you can then fly. You can fly in 3D space. Perch yourself on something. The butterfly can. Now, man is probably not going to get to a point where we cocoon ourselves and come out a flying being. Physically. But enlightenment feels just the same. How many of you have ever looked back on yourself 20 years ago and you say, Jesus, I am so not that person anymore? It's not that you have anything critical to say about yourself at all. It's just, look how, you might even envy what it was like to be ignorant and blissful. But in the end, you probably take the idea that it's better to be enlightened because you become more like perhaps the entire universe itself the more that you do. The universe has the burden of the universe. If there's a God, then God has the burden of all things. And the more I grow up and the more I become loosely more enlightened as time passes, the more I realize that the job of God is something I would never want. It's a big job. It's an all consuming job. How do I even have time for myself if I'm taking care of everything in the universe? I'm sure that mystery will be solved in a much more elegant way when we find out the answer, if we ever do. But right now I'm in a physical human body with you in this universe. And so the game is between myself, my immediate surroundings, my 3 sectors of life, self, work, and family, and you, my fellow man. I do not believe for a second that God has outsourced salvation to another man. Therefore, all organized religions that are selling salvation, I personally believe is an act of the devil, if there ever was one. Always remember, for those Christians out there who get all upset with me, the first voice that you listen to tell you that you're not with God and that you can't be with God because you're sinful, the voice that told you that was the serpent in the garden. There couldn't be a more on-point metaphor than that first book. If you are a Christian, unfortunately you've been buying the story of a metaphorical devil in the form of a snake talking to perfect man. Let's not do that. Let's listen to ourselves. Let's listen to the universe. Feel how you feel every moment that you feel. If you're feeling an emotion you don't want to have, especially towards another human being, well, find out if pop culture is the reason why you feel that way. Why do we get angry in traffic? Well, why are we in traffic in the first place? Why do we feel like we have to get to a destination? Usually it's pop culture based. The whole invention of a car is a corporate entity to burn oil, to burn energy, to buy a car that's not meant to sustain its value. I mean, how fucked up is it if you buy a car for, say, $30,000, you drive off the lot and it's only worth $20,000? Doesn't that sound like a criminal organization? And yet we swallow it every single day because it's pop culture's way. That's why this show exists. Here's the thing. What's the value of being enlightened? The value of being enlightened is that you increase your ability to perceive truth, to see more. We obviously know that the more that you can see the truth, whether or not we totally agree on what is true or what isn't true, you start to see at least the evil forces that are destroying your life. If you're a parent, you have one amazing epiphany that happens every single time you have a child. You have the life that you've lived up to the point your child was born, and then you have the life that you're fearing that they're going to live after you're gone. And you realize at that point that what everyone believes in the world is important. We mistakenly make the goal of saying, well, all I have to do is live my life to make everyone believe how I believe, like specifically, not theoretically. Theoretically, you could be right. Be enlightened. Realize that love actually exists. Drop some acid, for Christ's sake, if you have any problem figuring that out. But at that point, you live the rest of your life trying to fix the planet for your kids. I've got friends of mine that are billionaires, and it's what they're trying to do. And there's only so much you can fix in a lifetime, so you go for the low-hanging fruit. Maybe a couple high-hanging fruit, but man, it's tough. I know you feel me. I've gone on quite a bit here. A lot of pauses in this one, so I always try to overshoot. So if I'm looking at the camera and the camera says I've gone an hour, but I know I've paused probably 10 minutes, I usually try to go over. At this point, this episode's about an hour and 25 minutes. Anyhow, I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Let's compare notes in the comments section. As always, deepthoughtsradio.com for all the feeds. Make sure you understand there is a closed Facebook group that you guys are invited to. There's audio if you're on video, and there's video if you're on audio. It's on iTunes, on Google Play, it's on YouTube, it's on vid.me. Vid.me is the best place to see Season 1 unimpeded. I won't go on and on. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.